Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Darcy Verhun. It's Grace Under Pressure is the show that focuses on what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment, the compassion we exert toward others. And when you do it as a leader, as you will find out that Darcy is, you do it with the spirit of bringing people together for a common cause, and you energize the organization with your commitment to making things better. So Darcy Verhun, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. I'm excited to be here.
Great. I want to tell folks about you. Darcy is the president of FYidoctors, Canada's leading diversified healthcare organization. And prior to joining FYidoctors, he comes from Ernst Young, where he was, and a slew of other firms, where he was an accountant. And the reason he's on our show today is not just because he's a great guy and provided me with my great glasses. I hope you all like them. But they're terrific. He is the editor and contributor to a wonderful new book called Freedom of Constraints. And it's an exciting book, and we're going to explore it. So Darcy, like me, is a member of Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches, and has many other awards and certifications. Darcy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you. So
awesome.
Okay. Darcy, you're a very successful executive. You're growing for FYidoctors. It's already huge in Canada, and you told me it's recently expanded to the US. Why did you want to write a book?
Well,
you have things going on, Darcy?
I've got a few things going on. I'll tell you, really the dream started for me day number 17 at FYidoctors. Which marked our annual general meeting. It's a gathering that we have every year, and it brings together all of the doctors in FYI to reconnect, to strategize, to shape the company. And I'd been to a lot of AGMs before in my life, but I'd never been to an FYidoctors one. So this is not your typical AGM. It spans 4 days, and there's a host of sessions. Anyway, I was asked to introduce myself to 400 doctors or so on Sunday morning to kick off the AGM and deliver a keynote on high performance culture and teams. And the day before, we had brought in 2 professional keynote speakers who had written a plethora of books and were very wise and thoughtful. And I got up on the stage and I was introducing myself, and I said, well, and I haven't written a book. And everyone kind of broke out laughing. And I thought to myself, right then that now this has got to go on my bucket list, because I believe through my experience and so forth that I've got some powerful messages to share with people to help them be better, to be better leaders, and to achieve their aspirations. So it was a dream. And then last year in February, I got assigned to a mini group, where accountability group, I'm going to call it, but the other name used is called LPR, or Life Plan Review. And so I was assigned to 6 people I'd never met, and every week we met for an hour and we shared our life goals. Well, I decided to put my life goal of book on my list, and every week I reported red. And at some point the group said to me, we don't really think that's a goal because you're not doing anything, and so they conspired to try to help me. And along the way, one of the members of the group, Aisha Bursell, she said to me in one of our meetings, she said, well, constraints create innovation. And I didn't get it. And so we started on this dialogue of the topic, and it kind of opened my eyes to some things that I knew, but I really didn't know. And then she challenged me to use this to leapfrog, my goal of writing a book. And the initial dream was to write an article, which I decided to do a self-inflicted constraint and say, look, article would be great, but it needs to be a book. And so that's how it all came to be. And the dream was to make a difference for people, especially during COVID, when we're all feeling constrained together. And I thought it was like a great opportunity to try to make a difference for leaders and people that are all experiencing the same kind of thing today.
Well, you touched on the title, and I love it because it says the freedom of constraints, turning obstacles into opportunities. It sounds contrarian. So what's behind that, Darcy? Why that title?
Well, without constraints, or kind of guardrails, you can never be truly free, I think. And I've also, as I've thought about it, constraints are enablers to create innovation, because without a constraint, the probability of you looking for new solutions, stretching yourself, finding opportunities where they were hidden, is very low. So, the one example that that Aisha and I talked about was when Herman Miller challenged her to design the new office furniture, and the only constraint they gave her was that it had to be 50% the cost, and that created innovation because it couldn't be anything like what it was, and so it freed her to think outside the box. And throughout the book, you'll hear from all of the authors different examples of just that.
Well, that's wonderful. And I hearkening to your background, because you're an accountant, and that is a world with very strict rules that if you violate those rules, people get in trouble. Companies can get in real trouble. So there are lots of constraints. So has that shaped your idea of building a business and later this book? So
yeah, I'd say the shaping the business, it kind of comes more from my core values, and as I thought through the story that I want to share in the book, what became apparent to me was that what's happened in my early life really provided the foundation for everything that followed. So I learned a lot about myself through the constraint I faced as a young adult, and the parts of my DNA that I'm high energy. I don't have an idol. I've got stop or go. I love to learn. A challenge for me is like fuel. So those things of like knowing those things and playing to my strengths is help shape who I am. I think more than education.
Well, you open the door to it. So let's get into the story that you write about as a young person. You experienced something and then it changed your life. So let's bring us into that and tell us the story, Darcy. So.
Sure. You know what? I grew up in Edmonton, which is pretty much the prairies in Canada. So there isn't much in the way of hills there. And I aspired to be a ski racer. So,
great. A flatlander wants to be in the mountains. Okay. Yeah.
So the local biggest hill was 274 feet. And, I practiced on this hill, and I worked pretty hard at becoming a ski racer and worked my way up through the ranks. And, when I was in my early 20s, I was competing at, in the top seed of the Alberta Cup. And, I thought I still had a chance, probably really didn't, being in my 20s at that point, perhaps today, but I was warming up for an Alberta Cup at Mount Norquay in Banff, and I was doing slow looping turns, and I made a right-hand turn, and as I turned, my downhill ski went away, and my uphill ski went across the tail, and I fell into the hill, and it ripped my leg apart. And at the time, I lay there for a while, got up, tried to ski it off, and ultimately discovered that I tore my ACL, and the surgery didn't go as planned. And I was the 1 in 10,000, and I got a serious leg infection, and ended up spending the summer in quarantine with them, with tubes and things going through my leg trying to save it. And through that, that basically ended my ski career. My leg just didn't support downhill races and things like that. Right. So, I lay there thinking about what I could do. And, I chose to go back to school, and, I picked business and accounting. And, in university, I learned that I didn't know much about anything. I learned that I loved to learn. And,
Well, stop there. That's a very powerful thing. You learn that you love to learn. I mean, that opens the door to us achieving things. So thank you. So, yeah.
Well, something else I believe is if you can read, you can do anything. Because the answer is there, to search up and to read about. And I also believe that if, I say it in my story, if you're not learning, you're dying. And I liken it to, exposed metal outside. If rain happens on it and it just rusts away. And so I think it's incumbent, and it's fulfilling actually to be a continual learner. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the core attributes, I think, of my DNA. And I think it's important in life, and certainly is impacting my role as a leader in this business.
When you have spoken about this book, Darcy, you specifically say that personal challenges can be converted into personal purpose. Obviously, your life story resonates with that, but in a broader context, how have you seen that work? So,
well, boy, this is interesting. Through the process, I got to know the co-authors pretty well, and when I reflect on all of their essays, I think there's a common thread, and the common thread is like when you're boxed in, how you respond, I think defines you. It defines you, and I think if you look closely at the authors, they're at the core, they're really not that different than from anybody else. But one way that I think they certainly are different is when boxed in. How they responded is different, and they didn't become victims. They took action. They learned from what they were facing, and I think that's a differentiator. And so they found a way to use an obstacle as fuel.
Right, and it should be pointed out that most, if not all, of the authors here are fellow members of Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches. So, and we have varied backgrounds. Darcy, I'll say, is one of the few of us who has a real job. He's the president of his organization. The rest, so many of us are, and the contributors are authors. But we do have quite a number of executives. That's just being lighthearted there. And I think all of us have a point of view. Certainly, the authors. It's interesting. The concept of constraints, it was a meta concept for us last year. Well, unfortunately, still is with the pandemic, because you used the term boxed in, and so we had to draw upon our inner reserves. Did you find that, Darcy?
Well, boy, you know what? Being in the healthcare sector, we might have been a little ahead of the curve. So we were thinking about it pretty intently in January, and March 4th for us marked the single biggest transaction in the history of the company. We partnered with a large private equity firm in New York, for 40% of the company. And March 5th, I issued our first COVID mandate, and so we went from super high to super low in the space of one day. And
that's pretty amazing, getting significant financing, and then the mandate comes down. So, so
it was unbelievable, and and people actually didn't believe it, and at first I had people responding that saying, like, you know what you're saying and what you're asking us to do, and I said, yeah, and they and they say, are you certain? And I go, well, I'm not certain, but I believe this is the right course.
Right.
And I had some significant challenges, and boy, I'll tell you, like when we forecast in March, like we had the potential of losing the company. That was a very real probability, and so when you think about a constraint, like that was hitting us hard, and so, but at the same time, there's the reality of the business. Like we also had roles as healthcare providers. And not being emergent, like we're not sort of core emergency care providers, and that we're not, in the emergency ward of a hospital, but eye care and eye health is an emergency situation. So, we had to triage our clinics. We had to we had to furlough almost 92% of our team, and we went from 300 clinics to 50 clinics. We set up regional call centers so that we could care for patients, so that we didn't leave anybody uncared for, so that we could take strain off the system, right. And at the same time, try to figure out ways to innovate. And like on one hand, it was a huge constraint. On the other hand, it was a massive enabler. And one of the things we keep talking about coming out of COVID, like coming out of the main state of emergency, and I know we're still in the thick of things, but is not to forget the lessons we've learned. Because we learned some pretty powerful things about affecting change and how to view things through COVID.
We absolutely did, and I'm glad you touched on that. And you said something very interesting that I think is often overlooked in leadership. But you said when you were challenged, is this the right thing to do, Darcy? You said, well, I don't exactly know, but it's the best decision I can make right now. And I think every leader with a significant challenge is in the same boat. And if you wait for all of the variables, you have missed, you missed an opportunity, or you may miss a disaster. So you have to act with the information that you have. So that's a powerful lesson. So,
can I jump on that for a sec? Because
please.
I'm living it again today. Because we're now talking about, do we make vaccines mandatory? Mm-hmm. And just a mini story. We spent time talking with our doctors. We spent looking at the marketplace. We look at what other companies are doing, healthcare providers, etc. And we landed on our own solution, and we want to communicate it to the organization in a way that aligned with our values, showed empathy, and reinforced kind of this, caring for people and doing the right thing. I'll tell you the memo that outlines our go forward stance is maybe a page long, but I'll tell you, it literally took 3 days to craft.
Oh, I'm sure. So, and why did it take so long to craft?
Well, we wrote it, a small group, and then we thought, well, we need to share it with a bigger group of the management team, and I'm thankful that we did that, because when we shared it, it gave a bit of a buffer between when we finalized what we thought was the right message. It basically was 24 hours. And when I re-looked at it, I realized there were a couple of pretty important things that we hadn't landed. And, if we would have issued it right when we did, people would have created more confusion, because we were assuming some things that we needed to drive to ground, so that you can't leave the white spaces for people to fill in with the worst possible outcome.
And they will. And when faced with challenge, and especially in a pandemic situation, we are naturally a self-protective thing. We will assume the worst. So
100%, and so that led into the next day, and then we did some more tweaks, and then one more day after that. And it wasn't like we worked on it 24/7 for the 3 days, but it was 3 days.
Well, you know what? And this again, Darcy, you're just giving one leadership lesson after another. And the word I take from, although it was a 3-day process for a short memo, what you just demonstrated was the art and practice of deliberation. And along each step, you brought, new constituents in, and you got input from them. So the end result was more, quote, well thought out, but at least you had challenged your assumptions and tested them, albeit in a short period of time, but moved forward. Do you have a comment on that? So,
yeah, no, 100%. And, it's not that, everyone's going to be happy, or we're fully going to meet everyone's needs. We discovered in this case that at least one of our clinics that's fully vaccinated doesn't support mandatory vaccination, because they believe people still should have the right to choose. And so we had to pay attention to everything, and I think we landed at a good spot, and we signaled that we may yet change our mind, because it's a fluid
Well,
target.
I mean, and the crisis that we're in has changed a few times with new variants and different circumstances and all of that. And I also like what the third Darcy Verhun leadership lesson today is, you said empathy, which was the broader concept of understanding where my employees are and how do I meet them. Correct? So
100%. And yeah, and interestingly, that word, when we looked at our values, and through COVID, it became apparent that, from a healthcare perspective, empathy is at our core. And it's interesting that we actually hadn't used the word in our core values. So we've dusted them off and made sure that we've been intentional about
while it may seem that we have gone a little off track of this book, we actually haven't, because the second part of this book is Leadership Clarity from Adversity, which is just what Darcy explained to us. And that was a great thing. And there's some wonderful titles and topics in here. And a metaphor that's come up frequently is put your own oxygen mask on first. So what does that mean in an organizational context, Darcy? So.
Boy, I'm going to throw myself under the bus, I guess. March, April, May last year, I was in the office 7 days a week, and I don't know how many hours I worked, and that it was hard at times, and at one point, I remember someone saying to me, boy, actually it was Bill Carrier said it to me. He said, Darcy, if you're not taking care of yourself, how do you expect to take care of anybody else or lead the company? And I went, good point. And in that section of the book, we tease out the importance of, your own personal care and also enabling others to care for themselves. Because if you're not healthy, you're not going to make good decisions. You're not going to be able to stay in the moment. There's a bunch of things that you're going to limit yourself on, and working hard is not the right answer.
Well, I'm glad you touched on that, because so many business leaders and that I've had the opportunity to work with and are really, their heart is always in the right place. It's with their people. They want to do what's best. But when it comes to themselves, they will short themselves, as you were doing. And you have realized that that's a short end game. You're out there. You want to be the best boss you can, the best leader, and provide inspiration. But if you're fatigued and overly fatigued, you can't deliver on that. And which gets to the next kind of concept. You have something called keep the wheels on. So what are we talking about with keep the wheels on? So,
well, before we go there, you tweaked one other thing. As a leader, people mirror and they look to you for cues. So, if I'm in the office at 6 and I'm not going home till 8 or 9 at night, I'm signaling to the organization that's the behavior, that's our culture. And so I think just before we go to keep the wheels on, I think it's just important to be aware that as a leader, your behavior, you need to model what you expect. And so just a
no, it's good, and I'm glad you did that, because leaders do set the example, and and so people take their cue from you. So yes, the hard work is valuable, but if you're killing yourself, don't expect others to do it too. And so good insight. So
Keep the Wheels On is a series of essays that are all different, but they all have different perspectives on different elements of business. So we've got one on digital body language, another on employee engagement. We've got one on project management, one from a branding expert and talking about innovation. Another one which from Rob Nail, which I found really quite intriguing. The title's No Money, No Problem. And well, Hey, you know what?
That's very Rob. Rob ran Singularity University, and now forging another future. Brilliant mind. So,
yeah, you know what? And what he talked about, really I could relate to, and he drew a curve, and the curve was innovation and money, and like at some point, money is really helping with innovation, and as you add more money, you actually get less innovative, and so his view actually is having kind of just the right amount, or maybe not quite enough money, actually is an enabler for growth and innovation, and I was very intrigued by his message, and I'm taking it to heart for sure.
Well, it's great, and speaking of, in this book, freedom of constraints is the contributions of 25 different thought leaders in addition to your own work, Darcy. And so, give us an insight. What was it like pulling all this stuff together? This was your avocation?
Oh man, you know what? I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I actually thought I was being kind of clever by enlisting the support of others. I thought, wow, this will make it a lot easier. But it added a whole other layer of complexity. The dialogue with the other authors, helping shape and crystallize their thinking, working to ensure that there's kind of a logical flow, and even thinking through the sections, and there's small things like the creativity on the chapter, and the simplicity of the images within. There's trying to kind of keep us like a consistent theme and feel, mm-hmm. and I also wanted to make it easy for people to digest. So you can pick the thing up and you can read it cover to cover. You could pick a chapter based on the table of contents, or you could pick a section and leave it at that. And the real intent is that everyone can walk away with a powerful insight that can be meaningful to them, either in their lives or as leaders.
That's right. And I think that the operative word in this is perspective, because it's not just your perspective, it's 25 different perspectives, all themed around the freedom of constraints. How do we turn obstacles into opportunities? And boy, do we need that kind of thinking right now. And by drawing on people from the field of human development, but your business background, Rob is an engineer and designer, Aisha is a designer. And so it's a multiplicity of different viewpoints. And so the book is not what one might expect. It just comes at you in different ways, but it's, I would say, at the risk of being trite, continuous education, because your assumptions are being challenged from different perspectives. So did a good job. So sadly, Darcy, we are running out of time. But as you know from this show, I always like to ask folks a story of grace. And you certainly have demonstrated that with us, bringing this entire book, Freedom of Constraints, together. Do you want to add something to that, Darcy? So,
yeah, you know what? One of my mentors' name was Art Smith. He received the Order of Canada, and he enlisted me to help create the Homeless Foundation 20 some years ago. And he had cancer at one point and ended up in a hospital bed and went blind for a time, and recovered and met up with me, and he called me young fellow. He said, "Hey, young fellow." And he said, for a time I was in a hospital bed and I was blind and I was left to my thoughts. And Art was a passionate reader, so he couldn't read. And so he was in the bed thinking, and he says, as I was lying there, he said, I reflected on my life. And he said, young fellow, he said, I want to leave you with something important. And I hope you take heed as you live through your life. And he said, when I look back on my life, all the times that mattered were the times when I made a difference for someone else. And so I think that's an important message of grace. And John, for everyone on the call, John has a poem, and it's the afterword in the book, and it speaks to grace. And I think it's a perfect end for the book. So John, I want to say thank you very much for your contribution as well.
Well, thank you for that kind shout out, and thank you for your act of grace of pulling this book together and sharing the story of your mentor when he's talking about making life better for others. That is grace. That exactly is it. So what a wonderful story. So, Darcy, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. The book is Freedom of Constraints, Turning Obstacles into Opportunities. And the book is available in fine bookstores and especially on Amazon. So thank you, Darcy. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you again, my friend. So
Thanks, Ron.